Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another very exciting Thursday edition of the Civilizations in Review. We're here to learn about the Median Empire from a phenomenal content. Thank you again, Emily, for taking on this task. And with me is Tanya, my co-moderator for the evening, another phenomenal content writer and fellow. Excited to learn all about this great empire. As a reminder, you're watching us here live on Facebook. This also will be on our YouTube, our Spotify, our Instagram, and our website, so you can engage all of the great content and learn even more about this really fabulous empire. Thanks again, Emily, for writing it, and I'll throw it to Tanya to read the 101 word intro.
Thank you, Ben. Media was an ancient civilization located in what is now known as northwest Iran. Media's inhabitants were known as Medes. The Median kingdom existed from 727 to 549 BCE. The resilient civilization was surrounded by geographic landmarks, including the Zagros Mountains, the Araxes River, the Dasht-e-Kavir, and the Alborz Mountain Range. The first record of the Medians in written text was in 836 BCE. The civilization's inhabitants were divided into four predominant groups: the home, the clan, the district, and the land. The Persian and the Median empires amalgamated, and noble Medes people entered service for Persian leader Cyrus, which marked the civilization's end.
Powerful intro. Thank you, Emily, for getting us started off here, and thank you, Tanya, for reading. My favorite question to begin is what excited you to choose this empire of our many, many, many lists?
Well, basically I wanted to choose this empire because it was probably one of the ones that I knew the least about. I had taken an archaeology class this past summer and learned a lot about ancient civilizations. And this was one that I knew nothing about, but I had known about the Persian Empire, which I knew that they're intertwined. So I kind of wanted to learn more about that.
Incredible. Yeah, that's a very common answer amongst many of our live streamers, and I appreciate your excitement to learn something new. So let's just sort of jump into this empire writ large. I am so fascinated by all of these, how they start and how they end. And they all kind of follow a similar, either they lost a leader or they splintered off too much or whatnot. Talk a bit about their sort of absorption into the Persian Empire and their, I guess I'm doing this out of order, their break from the Assyrians to start the empire and then their absorption into the Persian to end it, if you know more about that process.
Yeah, so basically the empire, it rose from the Assyrian Empire, which basically means that the leaders of the Median, so basically how it works is that each section of the Assyrian Empire was ruled by like warlords, not in totality by like one single ruler. Like there was a figurehead ruler, but they weren't really in control of each territory. So the Median Empire kind of broke apart from the Assyrian Empire with a few other like warlord driven states like that. And that was in the early 600s BCE. And then after that happened, the second king of Media, Cyaxares, allied with the Babylonian Empire, and they kind of fully formed like this breakaway from the Assyrian Empire. And then for how they kind of they lost to the Persian Empire in the end. So they basically were splintering, like their rulers weren't agreeing on things, and it was kind of falling apart. All their allies, the Babylonians and other allies, kind of left them on their own. They didn't have any allies in the region, and the Persians were becoming a very strong power, and they just couldn't fend them off basically any longer from their territory. And so the last king kind of had to bow down to the ruler of the Persian Empire.
Emily, I would like to ask you, what are the things you found most challenging about writing this 101?
Definitely the most challenging part was not having a lot of source material about the Median Empire. It's not a very well-known civilization, as I said, so there was only basically a few sources about it, and most of it was from Persian history, and then from the account of Herodotus, which he basically recounted like the whole history of a bunch of different empires, and mainly the Median Empire.
That's another pretty common thing, is that there's a lot of, or not a lot of sources on some of these empires. So thank you, Emily, for being the eighth great resource hub for future people to read about the Median. I think that's a big reason why Alfuzeg begins with this empire project, because I think it allows the chance to learn about the formative communities that really build up modern Middle East, North Africa. So again, thank you for taking this on, Emily. I so appreciate it. Yeah, and in the very few sources you may have, you still got a very rich and heavy and wonderful article here. So again, well done. Let's talk about Herodotus. I think it's fascinating when one or two ancient people is the source of knowledge for this ancient empire. Where did he come from? What is his background, as far as you are aware?
Yeah, so Herodotus was an ancient Greek writer, and he was part of the Persian Empire. So that's like another thing that kind of causes like source material to be confusing, because he was more biased in his writing, you could say, because he was part of the group that took over the empire, and his work has obviously been translated and is like very, very old, because he was born in like the late 400s, I think, BCE. So his work is like very old and has kind of been like transferred through like generations. But basically he is called the father of history. He's known for like a lot of his written text because he did document a lot of things from the past that like there aren't a lot of documentation for, like the Median Empire. So yeah.
Fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I think that's a really cool piece. The father of ancient history, regardless of how biased or may not he is, that's still cool that there's that connection point. Incredible. Let's jump to the key accomplishments, the city, the architecture. I think some of those pieces still remain today, if I'm not mistaken. So tell us more.
Yeah, so the capital of the Median Empire was Ecbatana, which eventually became one of the major cities in the Persian Empire and is still today a city where tourists go to visit. And it's believed that Alexander the Great began his march from this city. So the city is also very interesting because it's a huge archaeological site today, because there's obviously, as I keep saying, there's not much known about this empire. So like looking into the past and kind of looking at this city specifically, because it's been there like since 500 BCE, it's really interesting to kind of see the art
thing. I'm actually throw it to Tanya really quickly, because Tanya wrote Macedonia 101, which was Alexander the Great's empire. So an incredible connection. And I'll have Tanya sort of fill in a little bit while your fire alarm situation resolves itself.
Yeah, no, it's awesome to hear about this, all these connections, and especially on architecture. That's a field I'm really interested in. So yeah, it's awesome to hear how Alexander the Great has so much influence in all of the Middle East.
I guess I'll just chat with you, Tanya, as Emily gets situated here. Did you know about the Median Ecbatana connection through Alexander the Great's march?
Actually, no, this is something I just learned with Emily. So thank you, Emily.
Incredible. Okay, Emily, if you want to continue where you left off, if you're able to, go for it.
Yeah, I'm sorry. But yeah, basically, just to like kind of go back to what I was saying, is that it's now like a source of archaeological digs and things like that. So that also stimulates tourism to this region, and which is now, I should mention, Western Iran. So it kind of is like an unlikely place to visit, but a lot of people do for tourism reasons, which like brings a lot to the economy there.
Awesome. Thank you, Emily. So I wanted to ask you, can you share with us some fun facts that you discovered after writing this article?
Yeah, so basically, one thing that I thought was really interesting was that of how well like thought out the civilization was. As it says like in the like introductory paragraph, there was a lot of organization to this empire. So on top of like what I said about the different areas of like work and like trade that were in the empire, there was also like a caste system, the priestly class, chariot driving nobles, herdsmen, artisans. So there was like a very well thought out social structure as well as like economic structure, which I thought was really cool to learn about. And especially the fact that it's very well documented means that it was known to like other regions in the area. And it was obviously documented by Herodotus. So yeah, I thought that was really interesting.
That is really cool. Do you know more about this caste system? I mean, clearly it's like defined on the job that they had in this empire, but if you know more about it, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, so basically this basically centered around the king. So the king was supported by its people, and the way that it kind of like held up the support was through the caste system. So the priestly caste and the chariot driving nobles were part of the aristocracy, and then they were held down in their power by the other two castes. So they were the bottom two of like the herdsmen and the artisans were actually armed free peasants as well as being like the lower class. So they also, but they were more actually allied to the king, which is kind of interesting also because the king had the support of its people for most of the time of its existence, which was really, really interesting too.
Awesome. I would like to know which of all of these topics, meaning inception and decline, allies and rivals, modern influence, etc., did you enjoy writing the most?
I'll fill in for you because I think what you said was the history section. No worries that there's a fire alarm. This is so much great information, so I want to make sure we get it all. Yeah, I'll sort of speak for you, and again, please fill in when you're able to actually verbalize it, so we don't hurt the ears of all of our listeners. Sorry that your ears are being hurt right now, but yeah, I mean the like detailed dates that you have in your history section specifically, I was very impressed with. Obviously, you talk about Herodotus and all of his incredible writing, but these sort of like breakdown of this empire in these sort of chunks and who the ruler was and all of the other warring tribal communities alongside. Really, really fascinating. So again, I'm just so appreciative of this. My favorite section on most of these articles is the key accomplishments section because I think it's cool to see what they did. I mean, we have some empires that lasted 20 years and some that lasted 3,000. So very different key accomplishment pieces here. But, you know, for you specifically to talk about the building structure that still lasts today and is part of Ecbatana now is quite cool. I hope to visit it in person one day. Well, maybe we'll take an Alpuzaic trip, do some architectural and archaeological digging and whatnot. But yeah, that's really fascinating. If you are able to unmute now, you are more than welcome to. I'm sorry that you're dealing with a fire crisis.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know what's going on. So the key accomplishments section, that like was also really interesting to me because it kind of goes off what I was saying before about the caste system and how like well developed it was, considering like as I spoke about earlier, it kind of branched off from the Assyrian system. And a lot of research that I did showed that the Assyrian Empire did not have a strong like societal system, which I thought was really interesting considering Medea was part of that system. And then in like almost, I think less than 2 or 3 years, it was able to develop this really strong system that lasted for a while. And it also built citadels in the center, and like it had a lot of architecture built in a short amount of time, which I thought was really interesting and just kind of shows like the like capability of this like small kind of section of a larger empire.
Awesome. Emily, I would like to know if after writing this, are you planning on writing another article on the Median Empire?
Yeah, definitely. I would love to kind of dive deeper into like one like specific part possibly, and possibly something about like as I was talking about the structure or like either the societal structure, the economic structure, like trade and things like that, because trade is actually something that's like a main part of the research I did because a lot of the records that were found were from trade with the Assyrian Empire and the Persian Empire. So I think like that would be really interesting to kind of look deeper into.
I'm gonna say yes, please do that. That is so fascinating. You know, these are kind of ways we know about these other empires, as you just mentioned, is through trading records, through, you know, their coin, millions of, maybe not that far, but thousands of miles away from their home empire. So yeah, if you can do ancient trade routes or something, whatever it is, go for it. That sounds really, really, really cool. I guess to sort of wrap up this empire here and just sort of, you know, any other cool tidbits or pieces you learned. This is just, wow, really incredible. Thank you again for sharing all your great research tonight.
Yeah, so probably one thing to kind of like, I guess, finish it off. I would say that the one thing that I thought was really interesting was that how little the research I found kind of talked about war, which is was very interesting to me because in the time that the Median Empire was like just the Median Empire, there wasn't too many conflicts that were recorded, which I thought was really interesting, especially within the empire because of like the caste system and the different groups, the armed peasants, the king, like all those things. So I thought that that was super interesting that in like the over 150 years that they were in power, there wasn't many wars or conflicts like recorded.
That is really fascinating. So it's like they broke away and then were absorbed, but not much. Fascinating. Wow. That's pretty unique. What a cool little tidbit for the Median Empire to claim to fame. Tanya, any final questions you have for Emily as we wrap up here?
No, I just want to thank you, Emily. It was really interesting to read your piece. So thank you very much.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I'll one more final one just because I I can, I guess. Yeah, I think that war tidbit is really, really crucial, and so really, really, really interesting. And I mean, you talk about in the allies and rivals that there really weren't rivals. I mean, there were the Scythians, I think, is how you pronounce that one. But if you want to talk any little final pieces about either the Scythians specifically or just any other of the communities they are connected with, yeah, this is again really, really, really interesting.
Yeah, so this kind of goes into that conflict thing again because the Scythian Empire, like it didn't really ever have a war with the Median Empire, but it kind of absorbed them before the Persian Empire did for a few years. But the Median Empire was still technically in power, so they kind of took over the territory, but the Median Empire was still considered an empire and still considered in its own right without having a war, which I thought was interesting because there wasn't a lot of information about how that happened, like if they had made like a treaty or some sort of agreement with them that they still were able to like kind of keep their same system, but it was like technically under control of another empire. And then eventually that empire like fell and they were defeated by the Persians and the Medes actually, which is really interesting as well because they were fighting then on the same side and then eventually were taken over. So it's very interesting, but there's not too much information on that like little section of the Median history, but yeah.
Wow. Well, there are so many more pieces to read in Emily's great article, so please go check it out on our website. That's alfusaic.net, alfusaic.net. Thanks so much, Emily. Good luck with the fire situation. Hopefully it's resolved. And thank you for writing such a wonderful article. Thank you, Tanya, for your great questions. See you all at the next one, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.